You're listening to the Overfunctioning Podcast Chat Sessions, connecting leadership concepts and local leaders.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another chat session with the Overfunctioning Leadership Podcast. I am Alex McMahon, and today I'm here with Trish Stahl.
Hello.
And she's going to be bringing a very different perspective, I would say, to one where when people talk about leadership, a lot of times they're talking about leaders who are in the corporate world, business world, those types of things. But in my opinion, and I would be willing to bet as well with John and Zach, that leadership really starts in the home. And so I brought Trish along here. She is Zach's mother. And as you can tell, Zach's is a ball of fun. So it has some very distinct mechanisms for his anxieties, and so he must have gotten these from somewhere, right? So
I don't know.
That's why we're talking.
That's what we ask.
Yeah, so that's why I thought it'd be really great to have Trish on, and just the way that you and your husband have raised your families has some different points to it that I think would be interesting to some of the people who listen to us that are raising families as well. And so a little bit of background about Trish. She has 2 degrees, one associate's degree in graphic design and a degree in journalism. Is that?
Yes.
Associates or I don't know
bachelor's.
A bachelor's. So one from Akron, another one from Malone, which is my alma mater. So
yes.
We have that in common. So when she has done a plethora of different things over the years, from designing an ad company. She was in Arkansas for a while, right?
Yes.
Designing greeting cards. And then writing for an ad company. She's just been all over the ads for a while.
Yes.
And then becoming a photographer and a faux painter and working in an office or doing stay-at-home care with other people, with a woman who had dementia, and maybe we'll talk about that later. So many different things, but her pride and joy is going to come up to, one of 2 things here, is she's been married for 28 years to Dwayne, so that's awesome. And then, of course, her children, Zach, Carly, and Logan, which she already explained to me that she doesn't want to embarrass them today, but I'm going to try really, really hard for her to embarrass at least one of them.
At least Zach.
At least Zachary. So is it Zachary, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's Zachary, and then he shortened it to Zach with a K, Zach with a CH, and then ended up with Zach with just a C.
Oh, well.
So he...
All this background information. I love it. I wonder, I'll have to ask him now why he did that. So I'm going to allow you to pontificate as much as you want on one specific question, and we'll go from there. And that question is, what is leadership?
Well, and I add on to that leadership in the family, because that's where my experiences come from. And that is parenting. Mm-hmm. And I think that parenting is, to me, the most important job in the world. Yeah. And I take it very seriously. Mm-hmm. And so I know on one of the podcasts, Zachary mentioned it, and one of my goals was to try to raise the kids with the least baggage, mm-hmm. because I've read enough to know that you take a lot of that first family, that family of origin, you take it into your adulthood, and there's a lot of interactions that go all the way back, and I've seen it in my own life. And so that was just a main goal of my husband and I, was to create a home environment that was safe and that didn't have a lot of tension, and that was a Christian family, a Christian home. Mm-hmm. And so I say that because there's a verse, and I wanted to share it. I wrote it out. So it's Deuteronomy 6, okay. And seriously, this has been my life verse as far as a parent goes. And it's, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads, write them on your door frames of your houses and on your gates. And to me, that meant live it.
Yeah.
And speak it, and take those moments through the day, take those instances that happen in life and talk about them and bring them back to that worldview. And live authentically, so that who we are as a family is who we are publicly and who we are privately.
Yeah.
And I know at church, we go to church, raise our kids in the church. The youth directors would always say, don't drop your kids off on Sunday morning for us to develop them spiritually. That's your job, and we're just there to help you.
Huh.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with church is important and community is important, but it's the family that those things are going to be taught and ground in the daily lessons.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a couple of different things from you. And we've talked about in our podcast about convictions, and there's a lot of different leadership books about like finding your why and what is my purpose and all those things. And it sounds like to me that you and Dwayne have identified those whys. And so when it comes down to making a decision about anything within your family, it all comes back to that Deuteronomy verse, right? And so it makes things a little bit way clearer on where you're supposed to go from there, right? And then as far as, I love this whole piece where you guys have, it seems to me, did you guys plan this out? Like, obviously there must have been some sort of planning before you had Zach and Carly and Logan. You know, like as far as this is the way we want to raise our kids, like what did that look like?
It's interesting because when I was, when we got married, we were married for 3 years before we had kids. I always knew that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
I knew that was, so when we were buying our first home, when we were structuring our lifestyle, that was always a goal. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to my kids about that goal, I say, do it as if you want to. Not that my daughter, not that she won't want to work and have a job and have a family, but maybe start your life, your economics of your family in case you want that option, to leave your options open. And so we always did. Because I was very career driven before children, but I just knew in my heart that I wanted to stay home with them. And then I did. I have to say that being a mom it's been my career. It's been my passion. So because of that, I've just been very deliberate in treating my parenting as if it is my job. Yeah. And it is. I mean, 24/7, you don't get away from it. So it has been a deliberate thing. And thankfully, my husband, Dwayne, has always supported that. I mean, he's been able to provide on a single income and been very supportive in that. And tag teamed a lot. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to come up later, but I mean, when there have been issues that I've not been able to deal with in what I think is a proper way, I'm holding on too tight, or that mom anxiety is coming out, I'll just hand it over to him and say, okay, I think I'm holding on too tight. I think I need to let go a little bit, but I can't. How about I give it to you and then you proceed with it? Yeah.
That's interesting. John and I were actually talking today about relationships overall, and I want to dig into this a little bit with you and Dwayne and your relationship, because when it comes to marriage and it comes to, you're going to have kids with somebody, you're making that conscious decision, that relationship is really, really important for the rest of your life, if that's the way that you're seeking this, right?
Right.
That's what a lot of people think that's what marriage is, and so we'll take that as we will with it. But there's a couple different terms that come out of that we're talking about today, as far as just regular relationships, but especially the ones that you're closest to. One, you have to be separate, and so you have to give each other room. And so it sounds like just the way that you're talking about Dwayne, it seems like you guys give each other room. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit? Giving each other space to do what each other need to do themselves, but also coming together when you go to make these decisions about your kids.
Right. Well, marriage has been easy for us. It's not been a struggle. We are very similar. We're not opposites. Mm-hmm. We're very similar in how we manage our finances, how we think about things, and yet we're very different in. He's very logical. He's an accountant. He's very logical. He's
a guy.
Concrete, sequential. Yes, and so it's been a nice balance when I know that I am holding on too tight or being a mom more than it's time to especially when you come to those stages when it's time to let go a little more and more as they grow older in their responsibilities. And I trust him. Mm-hmm. I trust him that even though he's going to maybe go at it a different way, that in the end, he loves them as much as I do, and he wants their best for them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes the difference in backing off. And it's interesting, as the kids have gotten older, and especially the boys, as much as I've been a constant in their lives parentally, during the day and in the summers and after school, and as they've gotten older, the boys especially have migrated toward their relationship with him in a real positive way. But it's interesting to hand that torch over as they get older in the teenage years, especially. They're relating to him more and more in a male way, which I think is really healthy. So
maybe you can talk about when your kids they're out, right? They're out and about doing their thing. How's the relationship changed with your kids
as they've grown older?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, ideally, the goal is to go from full-time parent through those early years, and then it's a gradual letting go of responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So at age appropriate and, personality and how they deal with responsibility. So
how do you decide that before I have you go on with that?
Well, let me back up a little bit because I talked about parenting. I learned this parenting philosophy early on with through Charles Swindoll. Okay. And the philosophy is know your kids' bents. So, study them, become a student of them, and study them and know how they bend, know the positive bents and the negative bents. And then that's where your parenting comes in. So through the years, as I've studied them and learned them, I know when they might need a little more guidance and a little less autonomy, and when they need to have a little more freedom and a little more... for instance, I'll give you the instance of driving. They didn't get their license until because I was probably less of a sell on it, until I felt comfortable with them driving. Mm-hmm. So they weren't 16 and they got their driver's license and then they were off. They had to prove to me when they could go out in a car alone. Yeah. And it was delayed depending on the child, depending on how much they wanted it and how much practicing they were willing to do with me in the car. Yeah. To get comfortable.
I can just think of all of my high school students, if they were listening to this, they'd be like, oh my gosh.
I know, right?
but it makes sense. I mean, what you're saying makes sense. It's just so funny. If you look at it from the viewpoint of a high schooler, they'd be like, I just want my license. Right. She won't give me my freedom. Dang
but
it.
Surprisingly, they didn't. No. Surprisingly, and we're like, this is very important. You're taking that car out and I've heard it used as it's a weapon. I mean, it's not just to be taken lightly. And they understood that, I think. It was actually backfired on me to some degree where I'm like, okay, you need to get your license because... And this is funny, but when Zach took driver's ed, I took it too. Because it was a friend of mine owned the driving school. Okay. And she's like, you can come to class too. And so I would when instead of dropping him off, I'd drop him off and then we'd park the car and then sit in the back of the class. I learned so much from driver's ed that I didn't know I was breaking rules. But yeah, I mean, we all should have to do this, I think. But my point is, they said that you get to your maximum driving capabilities 5 years after you start driving. So there's some push and take with that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're actually like having a relationship with your children and trying to figure out, when you said what their bends are, I find that interesting because we even talk about on leadership about how they react to different things. I mean, when I hear bends, is that kind of what you're talking about in some ways, like how they react to different types of things?
Right. How they are. Yeah, who they are. Bends is just a word for their personality and their characteristics and what they need, their positives and their negatives, what they could use some more guidance in, and what things that they're strong in.
Okay. Yeah, I just find it interesting just at that standpoint. So Charles Swindoll, you said that he was a major impact when you read him. Was there any other, because you said you did read over some different books. Was there any other things that you would say, man, if you are starting out a family, I strongly suggest you read this or do this or anything like that?
I look at it as, yes, I love to learn.
Okay.
And I am always looking for, you can never not learn anything. I can remember going to a parenting seminar at church and thinking, I know it all. And I learned one principle in that day that changed my parenting.
Yeah.
And so there's always things to learn. But yes, I would say the love languages is a big one.
Okay.
Learning the love languages.
And those, just in case anybody doesn't know what those are, and I totally forgot. There's 4 of them, right?
5.
I clearly don't know what I'm talking about. So, but what are the 5 love languages so people can kind of just see what you're talking about?
Physical touch, spoken word, acts of kindness, gifts, quality time.
Quality time. That's me. I'm quality time. That's mine.
Yeah,
okay,
that's. And it's usually a blend, and it can change. Yeah. It can change back and forth to different things. But what's important to know about gifts is that you usually speak in the gift that is important to you.
Yeah.
So there's so many nuggets to that whole philosophy that it's about knowing your children, back to the same, knowing who your kids are.
Yeah, and what you were speaking of is, I know myself is that I really love quality time with people. It's just one of the things that I love. But sometimes, it might be easier for me to accept that, but then for me to give, it might be different. Right. I think for me, it's quality time is usually both ways, but for some people, it could be like, I really love quality time, but I also, on the other end, when I approach other people, I gift them with appreciation, and I'm really encouraging towards them. And so, and I think we can both agree that some of my favorite people are the most encouraging people.
Right, because they're pouring into you the whole deposits and withdrawals. And
yeah, and sometimes, I don't know if you've noticed this too, but some people are really being encouragers. They don't even know that they're encouraging all the time. Those are some of my favorite people. So, okay, so the love languages, any other books or,
there's
people?
An interesting book, and I got to look at the name. I wrote it down because this book was instrumental for me in the teenage years, and it was called, it's a long title. It's called So You're About to Be a Teenager, Godly Advice for Preteens on Friends, Love, Sex, Faith, and Other Issues by Dennis Rainey. It's a long title.
It is a long title.
But I have to tell you, I read it right maybe when Zach was going into the teen years, and it just transformed my teen parenting. And it just, the main premise is pour into your kids before they're over, at the age of 10. So talk about issues of sex and drugs and alcohol and all those different things before they're 10, because they're still open and receptive to parents more than peers, I would say. And then as they enter those teen years, they've kind of formulated it's in the back of their minds. So when the issues come up and mom's, trying to talk to them and they're not listening anymore, they've already heard it.
Yeah.
And it was an eye-opener for me, even as he goes through, Dennis Rainey goes through the things that you think they're not already talking about and they don't already know, even as 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
So that was just eye-opening for me.
Huh. And this kind of goes back to where we even started about, I mean, you started out the Deuteronomy verse, and it sounds like to me, and maybe you can talk more upon this, is you consciously decided with Dwayne to come up with this foundation from before they were even born, and then it continually fed into that same foundation as they grew up, and made sure that by the time they stopped listening to you, that they at least they had that solid foundation, so they had something to fall back on every time they went back, and so they had a solid footing instead of trying to figure things out for themselves, because they're going to do that anyway, right? I mean, every human being is going to figure out who am I,
right?
But at least in some ways they have this solid footing they come back to you to talk about. And so, have you noticed your kids coming back to you for different types of advice? Would you say?
I think it's kind of scary because they parrot a lot back. They'll say, "Do you remember when? Do you remember when?" I think of this example of. I had always been telling them, when you own a credit card, if you can't pay it off monthly, you need to cut it up. I remember, so there was this time that I couldn't pay it off for the month, and I cut it up in front of them. And I mean, I ordered a new one the next day or whatever, but they were just shocked, and they will still talk about to this day, "Do you remember when you cut up that credit card? We couldn't believe you did that." So I just think that they're watching and they're listening. And that's another reason I say it's important. Who you are in public is who you are behind closed doors, because they're watching, and those are the things that can cause that rebellion and that anger in those teen years if they're seeing double lives and double reputations going on.
And now, in some ways, would you say that, I've been thinking about this every once in a while, but like, when you think about the Stahl last name, I mean, did you ever talk to them about, this means something, like your last name means something, not only inside this house, outside this house?
No,
but
the name.
Yeah, the name itself, like you're representative of me in some ways.
That's something actually I've struggled against.
Oh, okay.
Because I think, especially as a stay-at-home mom, you want your identity kind of is wrapped up in your kids. Yeah. So they kind of represent you, which that's not fair to them, and that's not fair to me either. Yeah. And so it's something that I actually fight against, because especially as they get older, because. And now that they're out of the house, it's like, they don't, if they say something that I wouldn't, it's on them. Yeah. It's not on me. So there has been that through the years, because you want your kids to behave, and you want them to be responsible and kind, and and they're not always going to be that. And so how you react to those moments of discipline and molding, you don't want it to be a reflection of you, of why am I, upset that he did that? Well, because it didn't make me look good. Interesting.
Yeah, because I think I've heard a lot in different areas, and geez, I don't have kids, right? So this is why I'm asking these questions, right? Because I've heard that of representation of. I was talking to my buddy the other day, and maybe there's a cutoff point to where that happens, where it's like, okay, they're going to be goofballs, and we both know that their brains don't fully form until they're 25 or whatever. Right. But is there some of that though where you're like, okay, if I don't, if Zach goes out and is a complete nutball when he's 10 years old and screaming on the floor at Walmart, like, is some of that still come in, or I don't know.
I don't know, because you want it to represent you want it, if we go out to Walmart and Zach is 5, I'm assuming he's younger.
Oh, he's not like his age now. Okay, good.
Yeah, he lays on the ground and is screaming and throwing a fit. I think rather than me saying, "Oh, I hope these people don't think he's a representation of my parenting," and I think we are to some degree thinking that.
Oh yeah,
but I need to look at him and say, "Okay, so I mean, quite frankly, maybe he needs to lay there and scream to know that he's not getting whatever he wants. So I think, but I understand what you're saying too.
Yeah.
You do want them to have pride in who they are as a family unit.
Yeah.
So, and they were kind of easy that way. I mean, Zach was a very, he's talked about, he was a very easy child. I could take him in somewhere and set him down with a book and he was fine. So I don't know that I really was tested to that degree.
Yeah. Do you think, and we're just going in a different realm here, but do you think that as far as you had a plan going forward, and I'm not asking you to speak of other families or anything like that, but do you think that because you had a plan and because you strike me as maybe a calmer person, and that you even said that your marriage with Dwayne has been easier, do you think because of the reduced anxiety in your family, then it might be an outpouring that your children may have not been as quote unquote troubled?
Wow. That's a book waiting to be, or probably already written a million different ways. I think it's nature versus nurture.
Okay.
Again and again, I'd like to say yes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of personality that goes into that too. I do believe that if you feel like you feel safe, you feel heard, you feel like your needs are being met, and learning those bents. I know this child needs this versus what this child needs. I think that heads off a lot of the rebellion and a lot of the, I talk about them listening to their peers when they got into those teenage years. Mine didn't so much.
Yeah.
They peers weren't all that, they didn't congregate to their peers for advice because I think that they were more comfortable in themselves.
They already stabilized what they thought about those things already.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
because you already talked to them at 10 years old.
But it's funny that, right.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you talk about the calm, because my family of origin wasn't that.
Yeah.
So it's something that I have to cognitively, deliberately do to not create anxiety.
Yeah.
I just think of my, the females in my background that are highly anxious, and before you know it, the whole room's anxious because of it. So I have that in me.
Yeah.
But I have to just back off, but Dwayne doesn't. So Dwayne's a very calming source in our family.
But you've made a conscious decision. I mean, that's the conscious decision, saying, okay, I could easily go this direction, but I'm not going to go this direction. And you've decided to read, and you've decided, even though it's still in your DNA.
Right. But I remember John talking a couple podcasts ago about how when that level of anxiety goes up, even the strongest will fall, collapse, or will go revert. I do, and it's just so you can. We're not perfect. But, it is hard to not revert back to that family of origin pattern.
Well, and if you're anything like me, when you hit that mark, and it's very, for me, I always think of like anger, and in my family, my dad and he got it from his dad, I'm almost certain, that like if they get angry, it's like, really angry, it's like hit the breaking point of high anxiety. It's like a quick snap, and I'm getting angry real fast. But then through the years from like understanding this, if that happens, I know how to cool this thing down real fast and apologize real fast.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
you're right. Being aware of it, and yes,
it's always a fun. It's there's so much to learn. And we talk about this every single time. We say this is a lifelong journey. This isn't. And as far as raising your kids, you are doing the best that you know possible.
And you talk about having a plan, and well, you can have all the plans you want, but life happens.
Yeah.
And it's how you respond to each of those, but then that goes back to our Christian faith. It goes back to have we prayed about it? Yeah. Have we here's. And being real with the kids, here's something we're struggling with.
Yeah.
it's interesting. We have this. My youngest son spent some time studying the German language in a language institute, and he was gone for the summer. And he would text, because he wasn't allowed to speak English. He would text when he needed prayer for a class. Yeah, 7 weeks, no English.
All
He
right.
couldn't see it, write it, hear it.
That's pretty solid. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, yes. So he would, the word in prayer in German is beten, B-E-T-E-N. So now as a family, when we need prayer among each other, of us, we say hashtag beten. And that's all that we need to do. And so it's, God's a big part of that.
Yeah.
God
yeah.
is the foundation.
Yeah.
That's
the
what
foundation
Deuteronomy
you
is all
set.
about.
Yeah.
Right. And
sure.
so I guess I wouldn't guess, but
Yeah.
it's all about grace
Yeah.
and all about, God and how we handle life.
Cool. Well, hey, Trish, it has been awesome talking to you, but we are running up against time. And so thanks for meeting with me today.
You're welcome.
If you want to check us out on the Overfunctioning Leadership Podcast, we have our podcasts are out there. We have more chat sessions and Zach and Alex's movie reviews, which are pretty ridiculous. You can get us on you can get us on iTunes. Thank you. YouTube, Google Play, Simplecast. And if you want to send us emails, you can email us at theofpodcast@gmail.com. And so with that, I'm Alex, and I'm here today with Trish. And we are thankful that you're listening to us.
Yes, thank you.
See ya.